Welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining, coming along to our first joint webinar with ADAMAS. We're going to be providing an overview of the Windsor Framework and its impact to pharmacovigilance activities in the UK. I'm Leah Heathman from Fusion Pharma and I'm joined by Sarina Norris from ADAMAS Consulting. Assume you can see my screen okay. Okay, so today I'm going to be going through the following. I'm going to start by going through the first part of this slide, and then after roughly 15 minutes, Sarina will delve into the PV activities as listed on the second part of the slide. As a reminder, everyone attending will receive a link to the recording of this webinar, a copy of the presentation, and also a list of the Q&A from the session. So do ask questions in the comments or the Q&A tab. Following the webinar, we'll collate these and send them out with answers, and that will be early next week. But before I move on, I'll just introduce myself a little bit further. I'm the Managing Director at Fusion Pharma and a Senior Regulatory Affairs Consultant. I have over 20 years experience in industry, having started at a manufacturing site in QC as a microbiologist and then moving into regulatory a few years later. I set up Fusion in 2013 and we're now a thriving consultancy. We've got a very strong commitment to our community and provide regular updates on our website, on our LinkedIn page, and we also have a newsletter as well. The links are there for you to sign up if you wish. This is our 7th webinar on the Windsor Framework. We've been doing this all the way through since it was first announced in 2023. But this is our first joint webinar with ADAMAS and with a focus on PV and the changes there. And if after the webinar you want to reach out to me at all on the regulatory aspects, then do feel free on these details here. I've got a bit of a frog in my throat today, so excuse me if I need to pause to cough. Okay, so let's just start with a quick recap on how we got here, since it's useful to understand that background. The UK formally left the EU in January 2020, and transition period continued for a year. This ended in January 21, where EU law no longer applied to Great Britain, but continued to apply to Northern Ireland due to the Northern Ireland Protocol. Throughout 2021 to 2023, a lot of work was carried out to align to these new requirements. And then in 2023, the Windsor Framework was announced with a planned implementation date of the 1st of Jan. So this has now been implemented as planned, and it replaces the Northern Ireland Protocol that was in place. And it's useful to just be aware that this protocol and the framework are wider than just medicines. It affects all trade. So the Windsor Framework measures that now apply are listed here on the first part of the slide. But in a nutshell, the MHRA have taken back control of medicines in Northern Ireland, with all new medicines in the UK now being authorised by the MHRA. In preparation for these measures, a lot of work did have to be carried out ahead of the implementation, 1st of Jan. And for PV professionals, I do think it's important that you're aware of the changes that have taken place and to understand the now pretty complex history of licensing over the past few years in the UK. It's going to give you a much deeper understanding of the new PV requirements, how they impact you, how they impact different types of products, but also prepares you for any odd situations that mean you need to be aware of this history, and will just help you to be able to unpick scenarios a lot easier. So from a practical perspective, the work involved has resulted in lots of packaging updates, submissions to the authorities to register these updates, and huge project plans between regulatory, supply chain and quality mostly. And there have been other supporting departments, but the bulk of the work has been done there. The objective was not just about compliance for the 1st of Jan, it was also about having continued supply as well. And this was very much complicated by the shared packs that were in place, and also the Falsified Medicines Directive. So while all UK packs should have now been updated already, or all GB packs, I should say, the impact to the EU packs does remain. Some will have been updated already, but there is some flexibility to continue to update these over the next few years. And this slide summarises the exact impact of the artwork, and it really is just for your awareness and understanding, and perhaps something useful for you to refer back to as well if needed. But in summary, the GB and UK packs have all been updated to state UK only. It doesn't sound like much. I can assure you it actually was quite complicated. Since Brexit, the Falsified Medicines Directive, or FMD, no longer applied to Great Britain, but since the 1st of Jan, this also no longer applies to Northern Ireland either. In most cases, the 2D matrix, which was introduced as part of the FMD, will actually remain on the pack. This will most likely be continue to be encoded with data, but this data sits outside of this FMD framework. The EU packs that were shared with either UK or NI, they will also need to be updated, but there has been some flexibility, as I said, and the Northern Ireland country-specific data can be removed at the next opportunity. So this may already have been done for some of your products, or it's being planned to be done. So it's useful to know as well, just to be aware that if a pack's been released for the EU and it contains Northern Ireland information, for example, this is absolutely fine. The QPs will be aware of this. It just can't actually be distributed to Northern Ireland. And all packs QP released before the 1st of Jan can also continue to be placed on the market. So you'll see that there's probably quite a mixture of different styles of pack that are either already on the market or still being released to the market. And this is why it's really useful to kind of understand this background and perhaps have this slide to refer to. So this here, I won't go through the whole slide. Again, it is more just for your awareness, but there's been a lot of changes to licensing in the UK. I don't think it's necessary to go through this in this webinar, but again, it's just detailed here for you to have something to refer to, which no doubt you will at some point. There's a few things I will pick out though. So as stated, the MHRA now take responsibility for licensing across the whole of the UK. Therefore, obtaining an EU licence for Northern Ireland is no longer possible. PLs, as in the prefix for the licence number, this always existed. They continue to be the prefix for UK-wide licences. PLGBs, these were actually only introduced following Brexit, and the PLGB prefix will continue to be used for the PLGB licence that existed, but the territory has expanded from just GB to the whole of the UK. There are some whispers of this changing to PL in the future, but I won't say anything more about that now, because that will be more work coming. Okay, so the Windsor Framework implementation impacts those products that fall under the mandatory scope of the centralised procedure. So that's where this slide and previous slide will help you work out which licenses are impacted. So for the purposes of understanding how your PV activities will be impacted, you'll need to determine whether your product falls within the MHRA's definition of a Category 1 or a Category 2 product. The MHRA have released a full list of Category 1 products. The link is here. If your product's not listed, then it's logical to assume it would be Category 2. However, I wouldn't assume this. I would check the guidance, since it could just have been missed off the list, for example. I would just double check everything for that, but this is a good start anyway. the MHRA are going to be releasing a list of category 2 products as well. But again, just maybe just check for the first year. All new products submitted from now on will require proposal of the correct category within the MHRA submissions portal, and then the MHRA will confirm this with the grant letter. There is detailed guidance on the MHRA website that will help you determine which category your products are. I have also summarised this on the next page as well. But the differences, whether it's category 1 or a category 2, will impact your PV responsibilities. So it is really important that you work with regulatory to determine which product is in category 1 and which is in category 2, and document this and have this on a shared list. So on this page here, we've summarised the guidance, and I do hope that it will help you to work out which product, which category your product falls into. It should be fairly obvious with most of the products, but there are definitely nuances here, and you'll need to unpick it a little bit more. The guidance, don't just use this, the guidance will help you as well determine the correct category. So this presentation has been compiled through all of these guidance here from the MHRA, the EMA, the HPRA, as well as attending webinars and discussions in industry. But guidance does get updated. So as I said, do always refer to the latest guidance from the authorities. That's it from me. Thank you for listening. I hope it's been useful. And as I said, I hope that some of these slides will help you in the future as well, something for you to refer back to. If you do need to know any further information on the regulatory aspects and a bit more details around the work that's been done there, we do have these similar webinars on our website. But that's it from me. I'm going to pass you over to Sarina now, who's going to delve into the PV aspects further. And so I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and then give Sarina a moment or two to start sharing hers.
Thank you, Leah. Yeah, hopefully you can see my screen.
Yeah, I can see it, Sarina.
Wonderful, thank you. So thank you for the introduction, Leah. Good morning. I'm pleased to present to you the changes introduced on the 1st of January 2025 for the implementation of the Windsor Framework. So we'll go through the changes which impact the pharmacovigilance processes. We will go through each PV process in turn, and then I will let you know the key points or items for consideration. As Leah mentioned, if you do have any questions, feel free to add them into the chat. So first, let me introduce myself. My name is Sarina Norris. I work for a company called ADAMAS Consulting within the GVP team. I'm a principal GVP consultant. I've spent 16 years working in a quality assurance role within the pharmaceutical, medical device and CRO industries. I started off in a global medical device manufacturer before moving on to a small pharmaceutical manufacturer. I then moved to a global CRO where I established their internal GVP audit program. And then finally, 9 years ago nearly, I joined ADAMAS Consulting. ADAMAS is an international consultancy specializing in GXP audits. We have over 25 years of experience across our GXP practices. We have expertise in good pharmacovigilance practice, good clinical practice, good manufacturing practice, good laboratory practice, good clinical laboratory practice, and computer systems compliance. And we also perform GXP audits, mock inspections, QA consultancy, and audit risk assessments to support your quality functions. Our contact details are in this slide, so feel free to reach out to us if you have any needs or anything that you would like to discuss. So as a reminder, depending upon the categorisation of your product, so either category 1 or category 2 as Leah outlined, the following PV areas may potentially be impacted. We will go through each of these areas in the following slides and delve a bit deeper into the changes. So following on from the implementation of the Windsor Framework, the following changes to ICSR reporting may be required, depending on the product category. So all serious and non-serious ICSRs originating from the UK, irrespective of the licence category, should be submitted to the MHRA via either the ICSR's submission portal or the MHRA gateway, depending upon which your company uses. For cases from Northern Ireland, we will still be using the country code XI, and ICSRs should continue to be sent to the MHRA and also to EMA. So then in terms of the product category, let's start with category 1. In the case of a UK only licence, these should be reported to the MHRA through either ICSR submissions or MHRA gateway, but do not need to be reported to EMA since there is no licence in place. For category 1 products licensed in both the UK and the EU, all serious ADRs originating from the UK should be reported to both authorities, MHRA and EMA, within the 15-day timeline. And then for all non-serious ADRs originating from Northern Ireland, these should be reported to the MHRA and also to EMA. For category 2 products with a UK only licence or a Northern Ireland licence, also those that have both UK and EU licenses, all serious ADRs and non-serious ADRs originating from Northern Ireland should be reported to both MHRA and to EMA. This is a change for some of the companies which previously only had a GB licence because they historically were not reporting ADRs to EMA. But since category 2 products now fall underneath the EU legislation, EMA reporting should have started as of the 1st of January this year. If you receive any cases from Northern Ireland directly from the MHRA, you do not need to submit those to EMA because those are sent directly by the MHRA to the EMA. Okay, so with respect to PSURs, the MHRA can define UK-specific submission requirements for PSURs for Category 1 products in the same way as they historically did before the 1st of January for those products that were authorised through the GBMA route. MHRA may notify you of this at the time of the authorisation, or this could be notified perhaps due to an MHRA assessment after the authorisation. In most circumstances, MHRA has stated that the PSUR submissions timelines will be in line with the EU, which means in the absence of any UK-specific requirements being communicated by MHRA, you would continue to follow the EU reference date list published on the EMA website. So then in terms of the product categorisation for the UK licences, Category 1 PSURs should be submitted via the MHRA PSUR portal. And if the product is also licensed in the EU, you would submit them through to the EMA PSUR repository as well. For the Category 2 products and the Northern Ireland marketing authorisations, PSURs should be submitted via the EU PSUR repository, and they will be subject to EU single assessments as appropriate. So this means that you do not need to separately submit your PSURs to the MHRA for a Category 2 product or for a Northern Ireland licence. But where MHRA cannot access the PSUR from the EU PSUR repository, you may need to submit the PSUR to MHRA directly through their PSUR portal. And at the moment, MHRA has stated they can access the PSURs through the EU PSUR repository. Okay, and then this table I've taken from the MHRA website, and this basically lists the requirements that I've just outlined, but in a table format, so it's a little bit easier to understand. So turning to post-authorisation safety studies, for Category 1 products, submissions of draft protocols, significant amendments, final study reports for all the studies are required to be submitted to the MHRA. Therefore, there's no change from the previous requirements that were in place for the GBMAs. For the Category 2 products and the Northern Ireland marketing authorisations, the draft study protocol should be submitted to both EMA and to MHRA. Significant amendments to the draft protocol should also be submitted both to EMA and to the MHRA. Please note that if a study was requested by the MHRA and conducted in the UK only, then you would only need to submit the details to the MHRA. So for major safety reviews, in the situation where the MHRA conducts a major safety review for your products, this may be in the case that there were concerns related to the product or to the class of medicines. The MHRA will review the available data. They will consider what kind of regulatory action may be necessary, and then they will communicate that to you and ask you to implement those actions. MHRA does also conduct other safety reviews for UK products. These typically could be triggered by a new safety signal, for example, or another new piece of information related to the product. Again, the MHRA will review the information and then will contact you and provide actions for implementation, requesting you to implement them. It's worth noting, if a UK-specific action which MHRA has communicated impacts on products that are authorised through the mutual recognition or decentralised procedures, and the action does not align with those positions, then the MAH may need to withdraw from those procedures, which will likely result in a national procedure, a purely UK-wide marketing authorisation or a standalone UK authorisation. And then turning to EU outcomes and EU safety referrals. For the Category 1 products licensed only in the UK, there is now no legal requirement for an outcome of an EU procedure to be implemented. However, it's very important to note that the marketing authorisation holders do have an obligation to keep the marketing authorisation up to date with any current scientific knowledge. So in practice, this means that marketing authorisation holders should continue to monitor the EMA and the MHRA websites and other websites for new information and make changes to their authorisations as appropriate within the context of the UK licences. So, for example, where the terms of a marketing authorisation differ in the UK than the licence in the EU product, you would need to assess whether the new information should be incorporated into the UK licence. And then for the Category 2 products and for the Northern Ireland marketing authorisations, marketing authorisation holders should continue to implement the outcome of relevant EU procedures, including those for the PSUR single assessments and the EU Pharmacovigilance referrals in line with the stated EU timelines. You should submit the relevant documentation to the MHRA, and you may be requested to submit additional documents as well. In exceptional circumstances, as I mentioned, where the outcome of an EU safety referral does not align with the interests of patient safety in the UK, the outcome should not be implemented in the UK, and MHRA will inform the marketing authorisation holders of any actions which should be taken as soon as possible. They have stated that this will typically happen within 14 days of the publication of the EU decision. So UK safety issues will still be taken forward irrespective of whether the product is Category 1 or Category 2. So moving to the UK QPPV, There have been no changes to the UK requirements of the UK QPPV. However, the legislative references for the product may change depending on whether the product is a Category 1 or a Category 2. So requirements for Category 1 products are now outlined within the UK HMR, Schedule 12A, and the requirements for Category 2 products are stated in the Commission Implementing Regulation Article 10, and they continue to apply. But in practice, since the requirements in the HMR and the Commission Implementing Regulation mirror each other, there are no differences which exist at the moment, I should add. Okay, and then to outline this a little bit further, I have taken this table from the MHRA's website, and this summarises the UK QPPV requirements versus the EU QPPV requirements. So if you look at the Category 1 rows, if you have only a Category 1 product and it's only in the UK with no EU licenses, then you would need a UK QPPV, but not an EU QPPV. If you have a Category 1 product with both UK and EU licenses, then you will require both a UK and an EU QPPV. The EU QPPV should be based in the EU, and they can act as the UK QPPV so long as there is a national contact person in place who is based within the UK. And this is the same scenario as prior to the 1st of January of this year. For the UK only licenses, both a UK and an EU QPPV will be required. There is an EU concession dating back to April 2022 that where there were product licenses only existing in the UK before April 2022 for the product, then the EU QPPV could reside in the UK. And that was published in the EU directive, which I have referenced in the slide. The Article 57 database does need to be updated to reflect the names and details of the EU QPPV or the UK QPPV. So in terms of the UK National Contact Person for Pharmacovigilance, I confirm there have been no changes to these requirements. Moving to the UK Pharmacovigilance System Master File, there have been no significant changes to these processes. The UK PSMF should continue to describe the global PV system for the UK authorised products. The PSMF for Category 2 products should contain both the submission metrics for the UK and also for the EU for the products that are licensed in both. And this also applies to products that have a Northern Ireland only marketing authorisation. So the changes here really relate to the Category 2 products. But in practical terms, as for some of the previous slides, the HMR requirements mirror that of the Commission implementing requirements. Therefore, practically, there are no differences. And then in terms of reporting of information on the QPPV and the PSMF to the Article 57 database, for Category 1 products, you would continue to follow the existing notification requirements. And for Category 2 products, the MAH must notify the UK QPPV and the UK PSMF details to the MHRA. And then additionally, they should also submit any changes or updates to the information to the Article 57 database also. So in summary, the implementation due date for the Windsor Framework was the 1st of January 2025. So if you have not completed implementing all of your actions, then please try to do so as soon as possible to maintain compliance. The categorisation of your products determines which processes are going to be impacted. Check the product categorisation on the Category 1 list, which is published on the MHRA website. And any products which are not listed there are, by default, potentially Category 2. But if you disagree, then you will need to discuss that or check the information related to your specific product. Based on the categorisation, determine the impact to each of your pharmacovigilance systems and processes accordingly. Note that the legal basis has been updated and Category 2 products now fall underneath the EU legislation. And as such, there have been several changes to things like the ICSR reporting, submission of PSURs, and updates to the EMA, and also updates and changes to the Article 57 database. And then I have added this slide, which gives you some main references here. But please do check the MHRA website, because on the website there are many pages which have more detailed guidance on each of these different topics. So if you have any questions, then feel free to add them to the chat. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Sarina, for taking all the time to prepare such a useful overview of the impact. I'm sure this is going to be invaluable to everyone who's still trying to work this out. If you do have any burning questions and you haven't asked them, just reach out to us on any of the details that we've provided, and Claire will be sending a link to a recording of the webinar, the presentation slides from both myself and Sarina, and any questions received along with their answers, hopefully, early next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.